Okay, so we'll just start. I think all of our youth are here, so we might as well start. Hi, my name is Corey Gil Shuster. I'm the director of the International Program in Conflict Resolution and Mediation at Tel Aviv University. On the side, I also have a YouTube project where I ask Israelis and Palestinians questions. So I am going to be asking our panelists some questions, and I'll be the moderator as they speak. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves in less than a minute, hopefully. And I'll call you out just so we don't have much confusion going on the Zoom call. So Aboud, you're the first in my list. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Aboud Ashur. I'm a Palestinian living in Ramallah, originally from Hebron. And I'm a 12th grade. I'm in 12th grade and I hope to study international relations one day.
Very nice. Gaia, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Gaia. I'm a Jewish Israeli. I'm from Mikveh Israel, and I'm also a 12th grader. I also hope to learn international relations and also political science one day.
Next, Ameen, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ameen. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Nazareth, a Palestinian citizen of Israel. I wish to learn computer science one day and also international relations. I like to play guitar a lot. And yeah, that's it.
Great. Great. Thank you, Ameen. Mira, you're next. Mira? Is she not here? Okay, I can't see who's here and who isn't. Okay, we'll go on if she comes back. Oren, you're next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oren Jian. I'm a Jewish Persian Israeli. I will be turning 18 tomorrow. I'm really looking forward for this panel. I think that it's going to be amazing. And yeah, I'm also looking forward in doing something significant in the diplomatic field one day.
Terrific. Thank you. Luna?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, here you're fine.
Yeah, I'm Luna. I'm 14 years old, a Palestinian Muslim, Palestinian Muslim. I'm from Sakhnin, citizen of Israel. And I'm happy to be here in the panel today.
Okay. Thank you. And Hanna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Hanna. I'm 18 years old, about to turn 19. I just finished high school. I'm waiting for my drive to the army. That it's on my birthday. I come originally from Mexico City, but I've been living in Israel since the last 3 years, and I'm Jewish. That's pretty much it.
Thanks so much, Hanna. Mira, I see that you're here. Can you hear us? Can I unmute her? Let's ask to unmute maybe. Okay, maybe she's not on. If she comes back on, Mira, if you can join us, terrific. We'd love to have you introduce yourself. Okay, so we have at least 6 and maybe 7 Palestinian and Israeli youth who are here to talk about the UN75 panel. What motivated this was the recent peace accords that are going on between Israel and the Arab world, and the hope that maybe that will stimulate, get things going between Israelis and Palestinians directly. So there's been a lot of recent developments, as everyone knows. If this is the starting point of where our discussion is going to be, whether it's good, some Palestinians will disagree, most Israelis would agree that it's good, but this is our starting point. What steps can help advance the Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts going forward? So who of our panelists would be would like to be the first to speak? And I'd ask everyone to try to keep your answers relatively short, 2 to 3 minutes if possible, because we only have 45 minutes. Who'd like to volunteer?
I would be happy to start, Corey, please.
Go ahead.
So I think that a very important key component in advancing the effort for peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians is education. I think that in order to actually solve this problem from its very core is to actually educate both the Israelis and the Palestinians from very young ages to love and to coexistence instead of hatred. Because let's say if there is a Palestinian kid living in Gaza, and for all his life, through all his childhood, his teachers and his guardians are keep on telling him, teaching him hatred and how Israelis hate Palestinians and telling them that Israel and Israelis are the enemy, then he will grow up and he will become a terrorist, and it will basically just escalate the tensions. I think that's the main problem of this conflict. I think that if actually the education will improve, or if the UN will in some way overlook the education system in both Israel and Palestine, then I think that the future generation will be able to become better leaders and to actually resolve this conflict better.
Thank you, Oren. Does somebody else have some thoughts?
I have something to add.
Go ahead.
So while the current peace treaties today between like Israel and Arab states are very, limited and have many loopholes and are quite flawed, in terms on the level of Israeli and Palestinian, what needs to happen first is some sort of issue in lawmaking and policy that puts Palestinians and Israelis on equal footing. Throughout the world, it's very hard to have two groups of people negotiate for peace and see each other as equal when on the situation financially, socioeconomically, politically, it's not the case. So there needs to be some mass scale policy reform to put Palestinians on equal footings as Israelis and to have them have overall equality. And we also have to take into account the different types of Palestinians living inside the region. There's Palestinians in Jerusalem with Israeli ID, Palestinians in the West Bank with only Palestinian ID, Palestinians inside Israel, and there's Palestine in the Gaza Strip, which is completely physically isolated from the rest. So the UN needs to take into account that. It needs to take into account the different situations and living conditions of each one, and in order to initiate even some sort of peace and not put it as a collective whole.
Points. Who would like to go next?
I would like to.
Go ahead,
I truly agree with what Oren and Aboud said. I want also to add that, like, giving the Palestinians their minimum rights is very important also for the peace process that we are having, and hopefully we'll have a great peace process. People in, like, as also Aboud said, and for example in Gaza, very important. And I also agree that
Luna, sorry to interrupt. You're breaking up a lot. Maybe turn off your video for a second and see if that improves it. Luna, I don't know if she's still on. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one, and we'll come back to Luna because I actually have a question to follow up.
I'd like to go next.
Can I go?
Is that Luna?
No.
No.
Okay,
so
go
Ameen
ahead.
spoke first, so I'll go with Ameen.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Ameen.
So I really think what Oren said is important, education, but in order to achieve education, we need first to achieve and keep all the Palestinian and Israeli human rights from violating. In order to go to school, you cannot be stopped by a lot of checkpoints to commute to your school every day in order to get education. So, and I would also like to agree with Aboud in implying all the international laws that are not being basically implied, and the result is to have everyone right in education and in all the other basic human rights.
All right, thank you. Who is next? I didn't see who spoke up.
Can
Mira?
I go?
Who was that? Oh, go ahead, Hanna. Go ahead.
Okay. So I had a few ideas that I wrote down. I'm gonna start with education and give more like more specific things around it, and then I'll go. I think we're missing a little bit of background, so I'll go over that after. So around education, what we can actually do is to make some sort of reform in the education system that we need to do it. For example, with the books, all the books in Gaza, all the books in Israel, all the books in West Bank, in these areas, they should be available in public to read it online. So you can know what people, what the youth, the children are learning in the whole country. Also in the Gaza and the conflicted parts, to know what, like, for the parents to know what they are like sending their children to learn. So that's something pretty basic that they do in the UK. I spoke to someone today about it. It's a really good idea for transparency. Another thing around education, it's to have the same narrative. So it depends it applies to all the countries in the world, but mainly in Israel. It depends on the region that you're searching something on internet or where you live, the kind of news that you get, the social media, the internet, the newspaper, and you also have a lot of bias. So if you get in the education the same narrative and unbiased facts, it will help the whole population. Another thing around education is that we should learn about all the religions that are in the area, not just the main, like the majority of the area. You should learn about Judaism and Islam and Catholicism and all the religions that we have, because it's not going to hurt you to know all the religions. And that leads me to another thing, that it's misunderstanding. So when it comes to religion, we mainly see our differences and not the similarities. And we have a lot of similarities. We just need to learn about the others to get to know like ourselves better in the future. Now I'm going to give a little bit of background, because I think we started without any like lead in that. So something that happens a lot in Israel with left wing and right wing is that negotiation, it equals weakness when you're talking about it in a society. It's like betrayal. If you want to negotiate with the other side, it comes from both sides. You'll be seen as a weak person because you're the first one to say, I'm sorry, how can we go on? Then you have the misunderstanding, because you have two different narratives, maybe more. Then the victimization. This comes with the societies. So both of the societies, all the societies where you have in Israel, they feel like they're the victims. They have traumas, and that comes with a family pride and loss. All the things that you lose, like people and territories around the years. And that leads us to this mindset of being in the past. Now, the good thing that we are the youth is that we don't think that much about the past. We need to center in the present and to learn how to communicate, because communication is the key. If you communicate, if you find a way to connect all the youth in Israel and to teach them about all the people, like the different religions, the different social backgrounds, the different geographical areas in Israel, if you teach them to listen, not to agree, just to listen, then you have a better future, because the youth is going to be the ones that will be the leaders of the future. So I think we need to find
I'm going to stop you because we're actually going to go into that soon. That's the next, okay. That's the second part, but I want everyone to have a turn. Luna, are you back? Luna, are you there? Okay, we'll go on to Gaia. Hopefully Luna will join us. I'd love to hear what she has to say. Gaia, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I don't think that only education or education is the right and solution that can help in the current and now situation. I think that once we, all the panelists, are going to be in the government, it's something that can be held and something that can happen and can be accomplished. But at the situation that we're in now, I think that the roots of this conflict, in my opinion, are deeper. And before going towards peace, I think that the trust between the two cultures need to be restored, because it was destroyed over the history of the existence of both cultures. And in my opinion, and the way I see it, I don't see a way of this area being going in direction of peace without restoring this trust. And I do think that by the smallest and by the most simple gatherings of the two cultures, this trust can be restored. And I have a personal story when it comes to that. So I've never met an Arab person before I started to do MUN. For me, Arabs were like an alien from outer space. And from what I heard, not in my house, but in the society that I grew up in, I heard a lot, oh, Arabs are like this and like this and like this. Because, once you don't meet them, you don't really know who they are. And in my first MUN conference, I worked with two girls, which in the end, I found out were Arabs, and they were so, so nice. And now they're my friends. And I think that just by this short meeting and short and so small gathering, I felt like I can trust them. And I think it's something that if we're going to make in a larger scale and it will become more popular in the Israeli society, I think it will really help to fill this gap of trust between the two cultures.
Great, thank you, Gaia. Luna, you're back, correct? I see you here.
Yes.
Great. Okay, go on with what you were saying, because I'd like to go into that. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was saying that, as Oren and I think Aboud said, and also I heard some of the panelists. It's very important what you have talked about. I want also to say that peace agreements and between Israelis and Palestinians also, both sides should maybe get what they really deserve as a human beings. People should really get their minimum rights and needs for really also going forward. I think also both sides, and also especially the Palestinians in the 1967 places should really get what they really need. Maybe Gaza should need Gaza citizens need their the port, airport, and lots of stuff that they really need as a citizens. And going forward from this point, we can really think about how both sides can interact with each other, and really understanding, as people said in the panel, just meeting each other and just breaking the stereotypes that they just were growing up by these stereotypes about each side, Palestinians to Israelis and Israelis to Palestinians. And meeting people, I truly also had the opportunity to just meet people and from both sides. And also I'm a Palestinian citizen of Israel. I also met people outside, Palestinians outside of Israel, and also the Israelis that are living here. Interacting with each other will really break the stereotypes and understand each one's perspective. And understanding each one's perspective about the peace process will lead us to just really have a good peace process.
Great, thank you. Very good, Lou. I saw that Ameen is here. Ameen, are you here?
Yes, I am. I wanted to add something, is that Me being a Palestinian citizen of Israel, I think we are the only group of people that have relations with both Israelis and Palestinians living in the West Bank, as Luna said. So I see that the big problem that we have is that both groups don't really listen to each other and they don't compromise. What we need is compromising. We can't always, no one can always play the victim, and no one can always say that he's guilty or he's innocent. We have to know how to establish peace by starting to listen to each other and starting to enforce all the rights that each group deserves, like drinkable water, consistent electricity, and etc. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry.
Can I add something to that?
But go ahead. I wanted to see if Amira had something to say, but
Oh, sorry.
Amira? I
Mira,
just have her. Sorry, Mira.
I'm here.
Are you here?
Yeah,
Hi,
I
sorry,
came
you missed the
after
beginning, so I wanted to introduce yourself quickly and then add if you'd like to say something, and then we'll go back.
Okay, I'm Mira, I'm 15 from Sahnin. I'm a Palestinian.
And speak a little bit louder.
Okay, is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, I'm Mira, I'm 15, living in Sahnin and a citizen of Israel. So I just want to say that what are you talking about the Israeli-Palestinian peace? I found this so complicated. The two sides are like we are right and we don't want to do peace with the other side, and no one is doing something good, and I agree what Gaia said, and I mean, like, we have to trust each other and stop saying about each other bad things, and to just show the other side that he's guilty and we are right, and nothing else.
Okay, somebody before wanted to say something and I missed who it was.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Me.
Yeah, it was a boy. That's
Me, Aboud.
Oh, it's Aboud. Go ahead, and then we'll spend another couple of minutes. But then I want to go on to one other important point that Hanna brought
My
up.
apologies, my signal's been cutting up, so I really it was hard for me to speak or anything. As a Palestinian living in the West Bank, first of all the Palestinian youth, this whole generation of Palestinian youth has been living in the framework following the Oslo Accords, which is autonomy and to be statehood. The idea that that Palestinians are supposed to live with Israelis, we've been living in a framework that doesn't compute this, that doesn't take this in. So if we actually want to even consider the idea of Palestinian youth, meaning Israeli youth, we have to get rid of a framework of the past Oslo Accords and have to start moving towards a one-state solution. That's the sad reality. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It's because Palestinians, we've been living in a slow signal world that, like, in the West Bank, specifically me coming from Palestine in the West Bank, is that, oh, we're going to be promised a state soon. We're going to be promised it since 1994. It never came. So if now it's to be live in a one state with Israel.
Okay, he might have cut out.
Israel and visit Israelis.
Go ahead.
That's what I believe.
Okay, great. What I'd like to take, you guys talked about a lot of ideas. Some of them are very high.
Can I add something?
One second, Hanna, because we're going to get back to something you said as well, so you can introduce this as well. But I want you to focus on how you as youth, what can you do as individuals? We can't change who our leaders are at the moment. We can't decide on what type of state it's going to be. What can you as youth do? That's what I would like to know. What is your role in all of this?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead, Oren.
I think that the most important role of youth from both the Israeli and the Palestinian side is to communicate, like it was already been said in this panel. I think that programs like this, like Debate for Peace, and different kind of camps that gathers between Palestinians and between Israelis are very important and are very crucial for the fight towards peace. Because, as I said before, if a child, if a teenager, if a youth interacts with Jews and sees them and sees that they are not as monsters as he was being thought that they are. And if a Jew is interacting with an Arab person or with a Palestinian and sees that they are not all suicide bombers like some of them think they are, if we actually manage to communicate, if we actually manage to see the person, the humans of the other side, it will help us communicate, and it will help us further understand what is the position of the other side, how he sees things the way they are. Because I think that currently we're fighting over agendas that are being told to us since we're young. And I think that it is very important to remember the past, but it is even more crucial to remember it in order to act in the present, to lead for a better future. Meaning, we need to remember that because there was so many deaths and so many killings from both sides, both Israelis and Palestinians were killed and died, and I think the real issue here is for the youth is to actually get to know the people on the other side, and to sort of build trust and to see the humans in the other side, and not to follow the old agendas of our priors, of our let's say the people were before us, because we see that we already noticed that this doesn't work. We need to change something, and we need to understand that we should compromise, but not over everything, because I'm sure that Jews are willing to compromise, Israelis are willing to compromise, Palestinians might be able to compromise as well, but not under every circumstances. So I think that we should be able, as youth, to find this, to look at each other as humans, and to actually understand what we are willing to compromise on and what we're not.
Thank you. Gaia, you wanted to say something? And Hanna, we will come back to you in a minute.
Okay, so I'm going to try and keep it short. I think that, as Oren said, those kind of gatherings are amazing. I think.
Speak up a little. Sorry.
Can you hear me better? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. What I said, I think I agree with Oren. I think that those kind of gatherings are super important for better communication from our side. I also think that stuff like MUN debate and everything that relates to cooperation and a need for negotiation and I think it says it, and working as a team and being able to communicate with a language that everyone are familiar with can help with building those bridges of trust once again.
Hanna, I know you wanted to say something. What role do you see yourself as a youth playing in this?
I think that we are the key, because the past 2 generations that have been living in the country, they have a lot of traumas from war and like a lot of wars basically, and we have a new mindset, and we don't need more victimization anymore. We need to change that status, even though it's a challenge, because of course we have especially Israelis and Palestinians that were born in Israel, a lot of family and a lot of grief between like all the stories that they hear since they grew up. So we need to find a way, as the youth, to change this. But how can we do it? I thought about the education reform, to teach all the religions in the area, to make all the books that the children learn from in school public, and to get an agreement to have the same narrative. A narrative that both of the sizes will agree. Like how hard and cold facts, not opinions, facts. Like news that includes the point of view of different persons. Like you can have the news about a terror attack, but you can interview 4 people from different backgrounds, religions, ages, and you can see how the 4 of the persons will approach the same thing, the same facts, and like literally the same like thing that happened in incredibly different ways. And if you see it from 4 different people that don't agree with each other, you'll get a better picture. So I think the social media, it's a great tool that we can use as youth, because we are all on our phones every day, and we are in the era of hypercommunication. So if we use social media and movements and connect with each other, if we get this gap together, if we learn to trust each other, to listen to each other, if we communicate with each other, we can like make an agreement that we are all part of it and that we all like feel comfortable, because all of the sides will need to give up some parts in order to achieve peace. But if you see that, if you feel like you're the victim, or that you have less rights or less money, you'll feel like you need more help, or that some things isn't like aren't well planned. And I think that's what needs to change. But with social media, we can use it a lot. I wanted to say something, a few things that I didn't.
Sorry to cut you off. We have some questions and we don't have that much more time. I want to ask the Palestinians, because this relates to what you said about rights. There's a little bit of confusion for people who don't understand Palestinians, their reality. When you talk about Palestinian rights, let's start with whoever lives in the West Bank. Explain.
I live in the West Bank.
Go ahead, in the West Bank. What Palestinian rights are you asking for that are not being met at the moment? And then we'll go on to Palestinians living in Israel.
Okay, so first of all, there's over 2 million Palestinians, 2.5, I believe, Palestinians living in the West Bank, which does not include East Jerusalem. These Palestinians from 1967 haven't been really given a full compromising form of statehood or citizenship. So we're really almost like stateless people, but we do have an ID. The rights that we're not ever being met are A, right of development. 60% of the West Bank is called Area C, where Palestinians who own land there cannot build, cannot develop, cannot irrigate, cannot cultivate without the permission of the Israeli government or obtaining a permit, in which Israel 90% of the time denies. Number two, the right to free movement. Israel has an elaborate form of checkpoints outside every Palestinian locality and town that they can use to restrict movement of goods and services and people overnight, closing the country and damaging it economically. We have no rights of political participation. So, although we do have a Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian Authority doesn't really have anything effect on the ground since Israel controls the West Bank, so we can't participate in Israeli elections or in any form of Israeli policy making. Another form is the form of law and justice. We're always tried in a court, in a military tribunal, in a military court, not in a civil court like actual Israel, like actual human beings, and what the UN says should happen. So those are, the overall issues and burdens that Palestinians in the West Bank have been facing for the past 50 years. And a lot of people don't know this outside because they think all Palestinians living inside the region are the same, but we're put to different rules.
Thank you, Aboud. Is there anyone else who lives in the West Bank other than Aboud? No, everyone else. Okay, so somebody, let's say Ameen, or sorry, we haven't heard from, who didn't we hear from yet? Mira.
Please relate to what Aboud said.
Well, in a second, I want to hear from an Israeli, Palestinian with Israeli citizenship, and we haven't really heard much from Mira. Mira, would you like to speak to this about what rights? And I don't want to focus on the negative, and we only have about 7 minutes left. So, but let's try this quickly.
Okay, we get all of our rights, but we don't treat the police and the country and the government don't treat us like the Jews, and they get all of their rights, and there is a racism between us when we are in Tel Aviv or in Haifa. They are the Jews like you are not supposed to be here, they say to us, and we are not feeling good, and that's not right, because we are all citizens in Israel, and we should all be treated like each other and the same.
Okay, thank you.
I would
Sorry, we only have
to add something.
minutes left. Ameen, do you want to say something very quickly? Because then we're going to wrap it up.
I think it's really important to emphasize on the right of self-determination for the Palestinians, whether in Israel or in the West Bank. And since the Palestinians of Israel can't go to the army, so that they don't have the army privilege, that gets them to job opportunities, which leads to inequality in the job field. And we have a lot of subjects in university that we can't learn, like we can't be pilots, we can't learn about nuclear science and etc., which is inequality.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly, because we only have about 5-6 minutes, can each of you think of something you can do as an individual? We didn't prepare you for this, I just thought of it, but let's try and end on something positive. Something you can do as an individual, which would maybe help the situation, because we're all just individuals here. Does anyone have anything that they think that they can do?
I have something.
Aboud, go ahead.
Oh, Gaia actually said something. Gaia, you want to go first?
Gaia, and it's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Aboud. Well, Gaia will be next.
So something, that's interesting that, was a concept, I credit the UN for this, but something I like to do to be a solution is embody intersectionality, that by also focusing my time and effort and being empathetic towards other causes in the region, not just, Palestinian, Israeli strive for peace, but for like other issues, women's rights, economic equality, social equality, all these things, it improves the scenario as a whole. So you know how the UN has 17 sustainable development goals, trying to take all of these into account and overturn the general status quo. It's something I like to think about when I'm in terms of reaching peace. So me personally, I went in startups and tried to help community problems, from trash on the street to even working in a medical startup between Palestinian and Israeli youth. So everything builds up gradually. Because we are young and our opportunities are limited, and because of COVID-19, communication and physical experience is limited. We have to do every small thing and think about it in the long scale as a positive solution, and that we need to keep those 17 sustainable development goals into account, because I really think peace cannot exist fully until all of these development goals have actually been reached to their fullest potential.
Thank you, Aboud. Gaia, quick 1 minute.
Yes, okay. So I have two things. One is really to develop MUN, at least in my point of view, in my school. I think it will be really, really important and can, get many people to get familiar and get comfortable with people that they don't know, people that are different from them. I think it's one thing. And then the other one, international online MUN as well. I know I talk a lot about MUN, just, it's my field. And then on the other hand, I'm a coach in Crembo Wings, and one of the most important values of this youth movement is that everyone are equal. So from a coach point of view, I want to teach my group that everyone are equal, and this is a very, very important thing, especially when we live in Israel.
Thanks.
Can I say my
Hanna, go
individual thing is
ahead.
going to be
You have
short?
1 minute. Go ahead.
Okay, it's going to be short. I think me as an individual, as an almost 19-year-old, what I can do alone, it's to spread awareness for social media. I already do it, but I want to keep doing it through Instagram, for Facebook, and literally tell my friends, and I have a lot of friends with different point of views, what I think, and to educate my friends through social media, from my personal and my blog, and to keep people updated, because most of the problems is that some people don't know about all the injustices that are happening. So if you know from both sides more and more information, that helps. And I'm gonna follow a personal example in the army. So the boyfriend of my current roommate, he's in the army. He's doing extra time, but he helped me to prepare for this debate. And he's a left wing, like I am. And he's in the army. He's spending more time, and he helps to coordinate all the problems with Gaza. And he himself makes sure that no citizens will be harmed. So he tries with his power in the army, his little power, to try to make the operations as clean as possible, to don't have innocent victims. So I want to do that in the army. I'm going to be in external relationships. I was already accepted. So I want to make sure that we can not get peace, but get closer to that by myself. So I think we can all do that in our like own societies, with our social medias, and in the army or in school with our friends. We can try to give a little bit, the little piece of stand, all of us together.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Who else would like
Can
to?
I go?
I would like
I
to.
would like
All
to.
right, I don't know who. Okay, I see Oren. So Oren, go ahead. I couldn't hear who. Go
Thank you.
ahead. We'll get to everyone.
Something that I would do as an individual is actually something that Hanna mentioned that is crucial for peace. Is speaking about facts and about real information about what's going on in Israel and in the Palestinian Authority, because I would like to relate to what Ameen and Aboud said about Arab rights that are not being respected in Israel, which is not just, in my opinion, wrong. It is a fact that Arab rights in Israel are being kept. It is a fact that Arabs have more rights in Israel than in any other Arab country in the world. And it is also a fact that if an Arab wants to join the army, he can do so. So Arabs have opportunities just like any other person in the state of Israel. And I'm sorry to tell you, Ameen, but if you want to go to the army, you can do so. If any other
Ameen didn't say that. Ameen said that
guys, this is a debate.
Palestinians aren't required to join the army.
It's for a different forum. We're not here to debate. We're here to talk. And I haven't heard from Ameen, Mira, and Luna. So who?
Yeah, I have to say that.
I would like to.
Okay, Luna,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I can't hear who it is. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So in addition to all debate for peace and modern United Nations activities, and because we are like about 17% of the population, the Palestinians in Israel, I do really try to represent the Palestinians in a good way with all of my activities. Like I'm a climate activist. I also learn with Jews and in a daily, like weekly. So I just really try to represent the Palestinian perspective in the in all the environment, the Israeli environment. And I do also defend the rights and also show the Palestinians' perspective, and just try to show people and maybe break their stereotypes about Palestinians. I think it's very important to show that your point of view correctly, and to present the perspective of the Palestinians that are living also in Israel, and also maybe in the diaspora, and also in the West Bank.
Okay, thank you, Luna. Ameen, you wanted to give your
I think we as individuals, youth especially, we're the next generation of peace. So first we have to think about protesting when we need to oppose fake news and stuff like that. For one, fake news could be that Arabs could join the army. They actually can't, because when they do join the army, they start killing their brothers. The second thing is publicizing. We need to publicize each other's story. We need to start to hear the other side, and we need to make the other side listen to us. And we also have to reach a middle ground for everyone. We need to start seeing eye to eye. And what's really important is that we need to start looking at each other as humans.
Thank you. Mira, do you have a final idea of something?
Yeah, I would like to say that me as an individual girl would like to share her opinion and to talk with her friends that have different opinions about this case, and to spread awareness about, like Luna said, the Palestinian perspective. And all of them said what I want to say, and I think they are right.
Thank you. Guys, we have to end it here. I'm very sorry. There's so much to talk about. You guys were amazing. I was so impressed. I'm not involved in Model UN, so you guys were really, I was very impressed. I was taking notes actively. I hand this over now to Stephen. Stephen, you could take over.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great, because I was having audio issues before. Yeah, well, thank you so much to Corey and to the first panel. We should be transferring over to the panelists now. So we're moving to the second panel, which is going to be feedback based on the first panel. I would like to first of all thank all our panelists for joining us. And I'm going to ask Ambassador Atieh, the Deputy Head of the Palestinian Mission to the European Union, Ambassador Ruch, the Ambassador of Israel, the Ambassador of Switzerland to Israel, here. Adi Kantor, the Research Associate at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv, the INSS. Mr. Yoni Eshpar, Political Affairs Officer at UNSCO, UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process. And Summer Ashur, who's a Palestinian-Syrian lawyer living in the UK from Dubai, and also a good MUN friend. So I hope that all 5 of you have your mics now. I hope you should be able to just unmute yourself at this point. And I want to just, maybe I'll start with Ambassador Ruch and then come around. I first just want to ask each of you for your thoughts and feedback on this first panel. I know that all of you are familiar to varying degrees with Debate for Peace and what our students do, and you're all supporters in different ways, but I would love to hear your feedback on the panel itself. So Ambassador Ruch first, maybe.
Good, thank you very much. No, I think it was a good debate. I do believe that the discussion should continue to address some of the issues where the perceptions are very far apart, as we have heard in the very last exchange, and there should be an open-minded and calm discussion about these different perceptions. What I have heard is the importance of people-to-people contacts. Whenever you meet an Arab or whenever you meet a Jew or a Palestinian and Jew, then your perception changes, and this is very much one of the topic that I have heard there. But the question is really how to scale up, and this is the question I would like to ask our young people. How do you scale up, like you scale up a startup? How do you scale up people-to-people contact so that it has really represent a social force to counter the negative forces, which are the forces of exclusion and incitement? I think that's one of the questions that should really be asked, because we have had people-to-people contacts for 30 years, but it has not changed the general mood in the two societies. And the other issue which have been raised, where I could pick up later on, is the question of education, which is obviously fundamental. And the third question, which I would like also to ask to focus on later, because I think that the conversation led also to that, is how to translate your convictions into something that may really have an impact in the society where you live, or in both societies in that case. I will stop there for this initial comment.
Thank you so much. And I'll move to Ambassador Atieh. If you can just check the mic's working, I would love to hear your feedback.
Yes, hi, Stephen. Hi, everybody. And thank you again for having me with you, Stephen. You know how much I am interested in this kind of program and of exchange between youth from different social and different origins in Israel. And why do I am interested about that? Let me tell them something to the young people who were talking this evening, because it was really very interesting, and to show them, to give them an example how important it is to talk to each other. I myself went through this experience in 1980. I was only 12 years old, and I had the chance to go in a program of exchange with an Israeli school, and there was a relation of friendship between us and between the Israeli youth by that time. And I can tell you that was a very important event in my life, and it determined too many of my views regarding Israel. And maybe this is the reason why I am here today and participating in this program, because I am fully convinced that this is the only way to bridge the gap between Israelis and Palestinians and to come, I hope, to a solution. So please, this is an important activity, and I hope that you will be able, Stephen, to continue and even to extend this activity to other Palestinians and Israelis, because only through dialogue that we can reach a mutual understanding between our people. And this mutual understanding is the condition for the future relationship between Palestinians and Israelis, whether they are from the West Bank or from Israel. Education, education, education. This word has been repeated many times by the young people who took the floor this afternoon. Yes, it is very important. And education is not limited to schools only. I mean, education, the minute that we come to live education start, and it is very important that education, through education, we receive values of equality, that we are equal people. There is no superior people on others. There is no chosen people and there is no unchosen people. It is the minute that we are convinced that we are equal, we have equal rights, whether we come from Hebron, whether we come from Haifa, whether we come from Alaska, whether we come from any part of the world, that we have equal rights. And it is very important to reach this point of mutual understanding. The second important element that I wanted to mention is not only the contact through video conference. Yes, thanks to social media, we have the opportunity. Today, I am based in Brussels, and I'm talking to you people in Jerusalem and in some other places in Israel and Palestine. This is wonderful. But please try to take the initiative and to go to see by your own eyes what is life look like in Haifa? What is life look like in Bethlehem, in Hebron, and in Ramallah? And this is the only way to learn about the conditions of the other and to try to overcome obstacles to understand each other. Those were some basic comments that I wanted to make before going to the second point, and I will make it quickly, Stephen, because I know that I have short time for that. So your discussion for me sounds like a peace building initiative and a peace consolidation initiative. What you have talked about education, mutual understanding, and to talk to each other, whether to go to the army or not, and to remove all inequality among our people. But I think this come as a second step, but what we need first is a conflict resolution strategy. A conflict resolution strategy could be based on two models: the two-state solution, as we have been working for that since 1993, and maybe a one-state solution, as it has been mentioned by Aboud several times. Now, as a diplomat, we are committed to the two-state solution, and we have been working for that for the last 30 years. Negotiations with Israel, between us and between the Israelis, aimed to reach a solution based on the two-state solution. However, the situation on the ground today makes me really very skeptical about the possibility to materialize the two-state solution because of building settlements, because of land confiscations, and because of the horizon for the two-state solution is vanishing under the Israeli government current policies in the occupied territory. So maybe we need to open a discussion about alternative models. The alternative models, for me, the most perfect model will be that in a country, all people will live in equality, whether they are Jews, Muslim, Christians, white, black, whatever, wherever they come from. Maybe this is a good model for young people to think about it for the future, because we are there, Palestinians are there, Israelis are there. Nobody is going to leave this country. Nobody is going anywhere. So we should be creative and think out of the box and think about alternatives to the solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for the future. Now, again, let me emphasize that we are working as diplomats for a two-state solution. But if we come to the conclusion if the two-state solution is not anymore possible because of the facts on the ground, because there are a big number of settlers, because Israel will not agree to give part of Jerusalem as the future capital of the state of Israel, because of the problems relating to the refugees issue, and because of the security and this and that, maybe we need to start thinking about something else. But dialogue, mutual understanding in all cases, whether it is a one-state solution, whether it is a two-state solution, the dialogue among young people is needed, because we are going to live together, we are going to work together. In a two-state solution, we will be neighbors. We need to talk to each other. And in one-state solution, we will be also neighbors, and we need to talk to each other. This is the reason why I am here. And this is why I would like to thank you again, Stephen, for that. And please, if I can help in any way in the future to support your initiatives, let me know. And I wish good luck for the young gentlemen and gentle ladies here in this meeting, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to move to Adi. So obviously you did a lot of work with the Empathy Storytelling Project. This is a little bit different, and I'd love to hear your feedback.
Yes, so thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Stephen, for this wonderful initiation. And I have to say, fascinating discussion. And I think my colleagues and I think we will agree on this, that we're, most of the time during our days, we're used to having dialogues and conferences with adults. And I think you'd agree with me that to see those young adults, actually, youth being so integrated and in these kind of subjects, I can speak from my side. It's very, very impressive to see the young leaders of tomorrow. So I had to start with this note. It was for me very important. I listened very carefully to what you said in the first panel, and you mentioned some really great words, important words, like what needs to be done. I wrote some of the words down. You talked about education, and I think it was Gaia who mentioned the term trust, how important it is to have trust between the two sides, and how do we restore the trust. You talked about the role of youth and how important it is to have to listen and to engage in the other side. These are really important processes and words. And there was something that I said, I'm missing another term. And I'm coming also a lot from social sciences and from psychology. And I also in my PhD, I study also the role of trauma in storytelling and how is it being passed from generation to generation. We haven't discussed the issue of fear and the role of fear in our lives, and how is it connected or related to our identity. And I think without, to have such an important discussion without understanding how big of a role fear has in our lives, without really, before we even recognize the other side, or before we even attempt to listen to the other side, we really have to identify the role of fear in our identity. And I want to, there's a sentence that in my studies, I used to hear this a lot, and I'm just going to put this into discussion. Who would we be without our story? Who would we be without our fear? And when you think about it, I think also both sides, let's talk about the individual perspective and not talk too much in generalizations. The Palestinians, the Israelis, all of us, we're talking about people to people, human beings, we have fears. And, the minute we have fear, when we let fears control our lives too much, then the fear becomes part of our identity. And then we tend to listen to the other side, because there's a place in us that says, if I give up my fear, there's a place in me that will give up her identity. I will give up a part of my identity, a piece of my identity. And who would I be without my identity, without my fears? And when you think about it, both of our identities were built on fears, on traumas. And without understanding the role, and I'm telling you, this has a very, very big role. And this is why we have not been able to achieve a solution, a reasonable solution until today, because we are controlled by our fears. So I really think, I'm just gonna sum it up just for this this part of the discussion. Acknowledging the role of fear, not letting it manage us, instead of letting our fears manage, or our traumas or our pain from the past of our parents, from the past of our grandparents, and what they had to go through. When we don't let that control us or manage us anymore, but instead we are managing our fear. And I think this is a very interesting, I think it's a crucial key, key point, or a place of a kind of a beginning where I can say, okay, I'm not letting the fear control me anymore. It's part of my past, but I'm not letting it be part of my identity. And only then I can actually listen to the pain of the other side, or the fears of the other side. And this is something that can really bring us together, because in the end we are humans. In the end, humans have fears. All sides have fears, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about what unites us instead of what differs us. And I think fears, or the fear of letting go of my identity or the narrative that I was brought up on, this can be a bit scary. And to start a discussion on that, I think brings two sides together, and focusing on our joint abilities, also joint abilities, what we can do together. This is something, a good beginning point. I can elaborate more, but I want to let my colleagues continue. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll just go straight to Yoni, if you want to give your thoughts, feedback.
Hi everyone. It's always such a pleasure. I have been participating in discussions with Debate for Peace for several years now, and it's always inspiring and fantastic. So thanks a lot, Stephen. Thanks to all the embassies that are supporting this fantastic work, and thanks to all the participants in this discussion. I'll try to make a few brief points after listening to everyone. And maybe I'll start on a personal note. I've been working for the UN here in Jerusalem for the past 6 years, and I've noticed a certain anomaly. When I speak with friends, with family, then usually, when they know that I'm working on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'm daily, reporting and looking into things like violence and incitement and demolitions and settlements and the stuck political process and the politics of both sides. And, they usually expect that I will be very, they kind of look at me and say, wow, it's very depressing to do your job, to work on the Israeli peace process, it's the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. And actually what I discover is that I'm far more optimistic than all of the people that I know, that my family and friends who are informed by, by the media, by social media. This job has given me a lot of optimism. And then I ask myself, why? Why? It's not that I'm not blind to reality. I work, face to face with reality on a daily basis from a very, very close and very high resolution. And I think that it's because encounters like this, it's because that through my job, I have the privilege to meet people like you and initiatives like Debate for Peace that are taking place on many fields. It's people to people, it's youth, it's trade, economics. I meet, thousands of peace builders, Israelis, Palestinians, different NGOs, individuals, because peace building can take place in many fields and by many individuals and in many ways. But it's usually, it doesn't get the same resonance as violence and incitement. I mean, if you want to if someone wants their action to make a ripple effect, to be noticed, to be heard, to be visible, then of course, an act of violence, vandalism, incitement, those are the things that tend to be reported in the media. Those are the things that go viral in social media. Those are the things that the UN, that we report on every single month. We go to the Security Council and we have a mandate to report on violations of international law, violations of human rights, violent incidents, incitement, terrorism. So we put together a list of all the bad things that bad people have done, and we give them the biggest stage in the world, and they can make an impact, and they shape the perception of the reality here and the perception of the people here. It's the violent people and the extremist people who are heard the loudest, and I'm, it's something that has been bothering me during those years. How can we give more visibility and more strength to the voices and the actions of people who are building peace? And I think it relates to what Adi says, because once it's only the actions, or mostly the actions of the violent and extremists that are being seen and heard and resonated, then fear becomes stronger. Fear is fed by those there's a constant stream of reports that Israelis hear about Palestinians, and Palestinians hear about Israelis, and that people in the world hear about both sides. And usually it's negative things. And it's very difficult to create a competing stream of reports about all the peace building action that is taking place. And there are far more peace builders than peace destroyers, I can assure you. So that's one point, and the question is, where does each of us come in? Is that we can serve as agents of distributing, giving more visibility to those activities, because it doesn't really work through the established channels. It's very difficult to do this through established media, through the diplomatic discourse. It's possible, but it's difficult. And I think it's important to find alternative ways to resonate, to create a ripple effect to those actions, to make them be seen and heard. So that's one point. The second point I want to make is about facts that were mentioned, the importance of facts. And I can tell you from my own experience, it's very difficult to get to the bottom of many things that are happening here. We spend a lot of time, we are flooded by information and reports, and it's very difficult, and it's worth making the effort to go down and to take the time and dig deep into things, because many of the things you hear are simplifications or distortions of reality by everyone. It's not only one side that is doing this. So I really recommend that you develop a habit of being skeptical about things you hear, and be patient and diligent in trying to get down to the bottom of things, and trying to consume information from various sources. Because only by triangulating or cross-examining facts, then you come closer to understanding the reality. Third point, another word that was that I kind of marked to myself that was mentioned here is middle ground, creating a middle ground. And I think that's a critical word. And not because creating a middle ground doesn't mean agreeing on everything, doesn't mean reaching a consensus on everything. On the contrary, a middle ground for me is a place, or maybe I'm distorting the actual meaning of the term, so excuse me, but the kind of middle ground I think is missing is a place when people can disagree respectfully, and where a discussion can be held in a way that neither side sees the other as evil, as demonic, as dangerous to their own existence. And I think that's the critical importance of initiatives like Debate for Peace, because in the title of the project it says we're here to debate, we're not here to agree. And I think acquiring the skills of respectful disagreement and debate is something that adults find it very difficult to obtain and learn. And I think youth in that sense can really set an example, but also to acquire the skills, the very difficult skills of having an informed, respectful debate. It can be fierce, it can be emotional, but it is always maintaining the humanity and respect of the other side. So I think middle ground, that's how I think, and I think we're seeing that middle ground being eroded. And I think we're seeing this pull to the fringes and extremes, and the public discourse is becoming very kind of black and white, and leaves very little room for the middle ground that I at least envisage. Last point, And I think that's something that we need. I think it was Ambassador Ruch mentioned here, that we've been having, Israelis and Palestinians have been having discussions and meetings and dialogues. I'm 1 or 2 generations above you, but this is not a new invention. And here we are still in a state of conflict, and here we are still dealing with distrust and with lack of hope. And I think it's important to understand, kind of to adjust our expectations about peace building. I think peace building is a task that we have to understand. It's a task for generations. It's not something that, conflicts are not resolved by a piece of paper. I don't know any conflict where there were a history of deep animosity and suspicion and bad blood between 2 peoples, and a piece of paper ended that. I'm not familiar with any such case. The cases I'm familiar with are societies that were deeply divided and had very troubled histories, and a lot of fear and a lot of trauma, a lot of anger, a lot of and they found ways to learn very slowly to live with each other. In some cases, even forgive each other. In some cases, find ways to overcome those layers and layers of obstacles, and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time anywhere. Everywhere. So I think, it's not that there's something wrong with us Israelis and Palestinians that we cannot get over it, and that us talking to each other doesn't really solve the problem, or that we can't, reach the point when we have a signed agreement that we can just go out and implement, and that's going to be the end of it. It's going to be long, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be painful. But we have to remember that we are here for the long run. We are here for this is a project that will have to continue, and if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. And I think that's where, meeting young people like you gives me a lot of hope. Seriously, it really is. It really does. I think you're fantastic. I think you are inspiring. And again, I have to thank you, because you really give, you kind of balance a lot of the people that that I meet in other places, but you are also part of a very large group of peace builders that I feel lucky to be in touch with. So thank you.
Thank you. And Summer, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. So firstly, just thanks to you for organizing this panel. As you referred to in your introduction, I've known Stephen since we were the age of some of the first panel speakers, and it's very great to see how far you've come, and very proud to see the panel that you've managed to organize this evening, which I'm very pleasured and honored to be a part of, with these distinguished guests and diplomats. In terms of the first panel, I think it was fantastic. It's very reassuring to see how much talent exists on both sides of the divide, on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, to see motivated, enthusiastic youth willing to take part and converse with each other. It inspires hope, and I think it's fantastic to see. I had two brief points to make, really, in response to what we heard earlier. I think the first one, which Adi Kantor picked up on, in terms of the use of language and fear, and I think it's interesting. I think it was Hanna's own who made the point that the youth don't know the past, and I think in many ways, and speaking as a member of the youth myself, I think it's a positive. For members of the diaspora, it's even easier. We've never had to experience occupation. I've never been stopped from going to school on one side. I've never had rocks thrown at me on the other side. And from that perspective, I can detach from the emotion. I can make decisions when it comes to conflict more rationally and with less emotion at stake. I think the concept of fear is interesting, because while we can remove ourselves by age from history, we cannot remove ourselves from fear. And the decision makers on the ground, both the Palestinian youth and the Israeli youth, regardless of the fact that they didn't live through the 48, 67, or 73 wars, they will still have lived through airstrikes and occupation and barriers and things that inspire fear. And I think what leads to the future, and where does peace stand and the potential for peace stand, I think a large part of that derives from our ability to remove ourselves from that fear and to be able to maintain our identity, which Adi very aptly touched on, maintain our pride in our country, while also accepting that we can actually further ourselves by making peace. And I think that reality has to set in, the reality that we are better off in peace, number one, but number two, making peace does not compromise on who we are. The second point I wanted to touch on is something raised by Gaia, which I chuckled at the time because I completely agreed with it when she said that she had thought that Arabs were aliens. And obviously I'm an Arab, I'm proudly Palestinian, my father's Palestinian, my mother's Syrian, I'm proudly both, you know, and there's a nexus to Lebanon because of course there has to be, and I'm proud to be from there as well. But from my perspective, I thought that Israelis were aliens to an extent. I grew up in Dubai, where at the time there weren't any Israeli citizens living or working there, and I went to a school which had no Jewish population. As a result of that, I did kind of consider Israelis aliens. I had no interactions with them, and I had no friends who were Israeli until I went to university. And it was actually very encouraging to hear many of the first panels state that they wanted to study international relations. I studied IR at the London School of Economics, and I'd highly recommend, if you are interested, apply there. I hope I get a referral fee of some kind. But in my first day at the LSE, my very first class, IR 101, the very basic class, I remember we were sitting in a U-shaped classroom, and the teacher asked us to go around and introduce ourselves. And it came to my turn, and I said, "Hi, my name is Ashur. I'm Palestinian, but I grew up in Dubai." The girl right next to me said, "Hi, my name is Esther Gross." Said, "Hi, my name is Esther Gross, and I'm Israeli, but I grew up in Paris." And there was an eerie silence in the class as everyone, ooh, you know, there was concerns whether there would be tension between us or whether, you know, things would kick off there and then on the first day of IR 101, first day of undergraduate classes. But actually, it's amazing. We turned out to become very good friends. And actually, it was every week after that class, we would go and get, you know, we'd go get a snack after the class and talk about how we saw peace going ahead. And it's amazing, despite the fact that she was Israeli having grown up in Paris and I was a Palestinian having grown up in Dubai, further apart than you could possibly get, we were on the same page on many, many issues. And I think when it comes to the question of what role can youth play and what is the role of the fantastic individuals on panel one in being able to establish a peaceful solution to the conflict in the future, it's communication. It's the fact that ultimately there is more that unites us than divides us. Culturally, we are similar. Religiously, we are similar. Politically, we are divided. Of course we are, but that doesn't mean that we cannot get along. And it doesn't mean that we have to remain as politically divided in the future as we are now. I mean, ultimately, my conversations with Israelis and Jews, and even though I don't particularly subscribe to the language and the use of the word Jew to represent Israelis, because I think we're conflating a religious and a political conflict that ultimately has only caused us problems. This is a political conflict. This is not a religious conflict. And, you know, ultimately, my interactions with Israelis as a Palestinian have by far and away been positive. And I understand I'm privileged and benefited enough to have not had to live under occupation. I've lived in the diaspora and I still do. And as a result of that, I'm more likely to meet people who are possibly more liberal or more center politically. But still, I maintain the point, and I'm an ardent believer in the fact that we are more similar than we are different. And ultimately, I think if you were to find any other 25-year-old Israeli youth, they would tell you that what we both have in common the most is that our grandmothers overfeed us and our mothers call us too much. And that's the same on both sides. So if at least we can overcome those obstacles, we can definitely at least work towards peace. And I'm looking forward to the comments of the rest of the panel.
Thank you. And it looks like we're going to go about 10 minutes over, so we'll try to finish by 7:10. And I just want to make sure to get the second round in. And so UN75 is, of course, having this global conversation and bringing the ideas of the UN to the people around the world and bringing our feedback back to the UN. So on that note, and I want to emphasize one point that I forgot to emphasize initially, which is that the first panel, the panelists had never actually met each other before, in the sense that some of them knew one another well, but this particular group of students had never met, and I don't think there was any one student who knew everyone. Maybe there's one. Given what we've seen, my question is, what are your thoughts? What are your recommendations? What are your ideas for how we can take this kind of back to the top-down peace process? So I think there is something to be learned here from how youth can sit and obviously have very different perspectives, but go about and have that civil debate and reach agreements often. And so the question is, how do you see us bringing this back to the UN, to multilateral diplomacy? and to governments, because they're happy to very happy to be involved with the people-to-people diplomacy, but there's not always a connection. I mean, we don't often get or often enough get diplomats reading our MUN resolutions or watching conferences or things like that. So does anyone want to jump in and address that one?
But I'm not sure I have the solution, because you on the one hand, on the peace, what is called the peace process, one cannot really say that the UN has a decisive role right now. However, the UN is involved on a number of issues which are important and will be defining for the future of the young generation in Israel, in Palestine, and elsewhere. Somebody has mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG. And this is maybe where I would like to start making 2 points. But before, maybe I should say, I think both in Israel and Palestine, over 40% of the population is below the age of 24. So of course, the youth is super important, and is super important for the two countries, for the authorities, both in Palestine and in Israel, to develop policies that will prepare the best the youth to address the challenges of the future. And I think the UN can be helpful also as a mobilizing factor, as an advisor to pour resources in the right place. Now, speaking of challenges, I see two types of challenges in this region. The first one is, living together. Obviously, as we have heard from the first panel, this is not obvious. It will require a lot of work to overcome the fears that have mentioned Adel Kantor, but even more than that, I think, is the humiliation. In my view, humiliation is a even more important collective factor that can lead to wrong policies, by the way. So working on this aspect, through working on narratives, as has been mentioned by several panelists, including Hanna, seems to be very important. Now, I don't think you work on narratives to arrive on a common narrative, but if already you can listen, as you have said, Hanna, and acknowledge the narrative of the other, that's already a long, long, long way, and it will be a lot to maybe counter some of those who are pouring oil on the fire. But living together must mean, for the people who are your age, to have opportunities to develop yourself, opportunities to have jobs, opportunities to create companies, opportunities to be entrepreneurs. And it is not obvious, of course, it is even less obvious in the West Bank and even less in Gaza. But I think the UN does have some program to create opportunities. Now, creating opportunities is also a responsibility of the occupying power, meaning Israel. The second big challenge, because we will have a lot of change because of the digitalization of the economy, there will be huge changes in the way the economy works in the future. And the second one are the generational challenges that we will all face. Not only about jobs and opportunities, it's also about climate change, about the environment, about the water stress and all the stress that will increase in this region, and which will be aggravated by the fact that the whole Middle East is the least integrated region in the world, the least cooperative region in the world. So definitely what I would think of if I would be a young people having to live the rest of my life in the Middle East, including Israel and Palestine, I would definitely try to bring to the political level the necessity to work together, and together with Jordan, and together with Egypt, and together with one day Lebanon and Syria, to address the real existential threats, which will very soon, and is already partly, by the way, confronting the whole region. Now, how do you address those very substantive issues? I would like to mention three tracks. The first one is obviously education. it's about living together. Well, if I would be a young Israeli today or young Palestinians, I would try to build a movement in my high school or in my university to press the university or the high school to teach the Palestinian narrative or the Jewish narrative. And also, I think it is wrong that Arabic is not a mandatory field of education, starting already in the young classes. And Hebrew, of course, but I think most Palestinian Israelis do speak Hebrew, but the opposite is not true. And it is the basic respect towards a 20% minority in your country to learn the language. One word on the UN and education, we should remember here that the UN is playing a fundamental role in education in Gaza and in the Palestinian camps elsewhere through UNRWA. I think almost 250,000 children are visiting UNRWA schools. Now I know that there is a lot of criticism for those schools, but I think, and they are certainly not perfect, and the curriculum is maybe not perfect. But if those schools would not exist, I leave it to you to imagine what would happen. Education is one, and it can be formal or informal, but let's face it, it is much more effective if it is formal. So put pressure on your government, tell them, I want to learn Arabic. I want to learn the narrative of the other. The second issue, or the second means to address some of the issues I have mentioned, is to try to mobilize on these common issues. And to mobilize across the border through the social networks, it's possible today to mobilize on issues which are common. We are starting to try to develop programs where women who are facing the same kind of patriarchal conservative societies and problems related to it are starting to mobilize and speak together and say, hey, we have the same problems. Why is it not possible to mobilize across the Green Line on issues like women, environment, human rights? I mean, we have in our constitution the duty to promote human rights all over the world. Now, this is of course a very ambitious endeavor, but I can't understand how you can live on one side of a border knowing that the people with whom you want to work and you want to live in the future do not enjoy the same rights as you have. So mobilizing for peace and for human rights would seem to be very normal for young people. And finally, the good news is that there are a number of initiatives across the Green Line, which I would like to mention here and which are trying to address some of these issues like jobs opportunities, equal opportunities, and environment. One of them is Tech to Peace. I think one of them has hinted to something that could be Tech to Peace. Another one is Scaling Up 50-50, which is a VC trying to promote joint projects between Israelis and Palestinians. I'm very impressed also with the work which is being done by EcoPeace. Very interesting because involving also Jordan. And finally, the Arava Institute is an amazing place where Israelis, Palestinian, Jordanian students, and even students from other places in the Arab world, like Morocco, can meet and develop projects precisely to address the big challenges of the future that we will all face. I will stop here. Thank you. I was a bit long, Steve.
Thank you for the ideas. Ambassador Atieh, can you hear us?
Yes, Stephen, I will add 2 points regarding the role of the United Nations. And I think that the United Nations played a major role in the conflict since it was created, and it has also responsibilities. We all understand that the United Nations has a limited power over the parties in the conflict, yet it has to continue playing its role. It should denounce injustice. It should denounce discrimination measures imposed especially by Israel against the Palestinians, the occupied territory inside Israel. and it should speak out about some, allow me to say, some racist regime. And I mean, this is the way to solve the problem and to come to a full understanding that we should identify the gaps, we should identify the problems, and think together how can we overcome those obstacles. And obviously, the government of the State of Israel today is imposing discrimination regime, whether it is over the Palestinians in the occupied territory or over Israel. Somebody among the youth mentioned that Arabs have more rights in Israel than in any other Arab country in the Middle East. Yes, it could be true, but it does not mean that the situation of Palestinians in Israel is perfect. It does not mean that there is no discriminations. And Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has a discrimination regime established in its constitution or in the basic law. And we should have the courage to open the debate about that.
Ambassador, I'm
yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. I want to give the microphone really quickly to Adi, because I know she has to leave. So Adi,
yes.
if you could just speak quickly where we have to leave. And then Ambassador Atieh, when I come back, I just want to return to my question, which was about how can we give the youth the voice. So if you recall, the panel that we had at the European Parliament, how can we have one of those for students? You know, how can we get them to actually, instead of adults, having the youth up there? So that'll be my question. But let me go first. Let me go first to Adi, because I know she has to leave.
Yes, thank you. I have to start with an apology that I must leave in 2 minutes for another call that people are waiting. So I apologize in advance that I have to leave this really important discussion earlier. I will say it very, very short and leave time for my colleagues. And again, say thank you very much for this discussion. You know, when we talk about the role of the UN and what can the UN or the projects in the UN, what can they do in order to advance more cooperation between the youth? Because we did talk about the role of youth and how important, what is unique about younger generation today in comparison to the, older generations. There is a lot of uniqueness here. And I think, and you guys are really singular, and it's important that you know that. It's not just about being the future generation. You are, and I'm referring here, of course, to our participants, the young students here among us. You are, on the one hand, you're also a bit more far from past traumas. This was said before by my colleagues here. You did experience what you experienced in your life, but you're more far from the events. And I think this is what makes you so unique, that you have a very, very singular a perspective on politics today that is a huge advantage that no one else has and that you guys have. And I think this is a huge advantage from your side. And knowing that and taking this under consideration, I think from the UN side, investing in more youth projects, bringing really interpersonal communication as much as possible. Like, for example, this project, Debate for Peace, bringing young people together, having them, to make them meet each other in an interpersonal way, not as two sides talking, but really people to people, person to person. We didn't talk about the role of storytelling. It's all about hearing the other's story, getting to know the story of the family, getting to know the habits, the culture. This is not done enough. We talk a lot about politics. We talk a lot about what needs to be done. We refer a lot to big words like education, but we really have no idea about the other side. We don't know the stories. We don't know the family stories. The minute we hear, we are acquainted to the stories. The minute then we can develop what this wonderful word called empathy. And empathy is the basic thing that if I were to suggest or to recommend to the UN in what to invest more in empathy, in projects that develop empathy. For example, a way of developing empathy between youth groups from the Palestinian side and from the Jewish-Israeli side would be, for example, to think about the ambassador, of course, referred to this before. What are our joint challenges? We are challenged today by enormous problems like climate change, for example. I don't know, we didn't talk about this COVID-19 that affects all of our lives, health challenges, you know, this just by being human beings, we are affected by that. You know, the virus doesn't know how to differentiate between where does the green line end and where does it start. It hurts everyone. So if, for example, there would be a joint group of Israelis and Palestinians referring to how can we better deal with or cope with challenges of our time, like the virus or health, economic crisis. We are in the midst of economic crisis all over the world. This would be a wonderful, initiative to see young Palestinians, young Israelis, Jewish Israelis sit together and really see how can both sides together cope with the challenges of the present time and the future, which is not just the conflict, but it's a lot bigger issues like global warming and such things like that. So this is something I would invest in more, to really think what are the common challenges that affect all of us and deal with them together. And with this, I will end and thank so much for the organizers and Stephen and for all the participants, and apologize again that I have to leave.
Thank you. And Ambassador Atieh, let me come right back to you. So how can we get the youth voices up there in front?
Yes, Stephen, it's very important. We have talked together about your project to come to the European Parliament, and I think, as I said, it is a very important initiative because due to the political crisis between us and the Israeli government, and between the frozen of and due to the frozen of the peace negotiations, the general feeling in Europe is that people are becoming very cynic, very pessimistic regarding the future of the Palestinians and Israelis. Therefore, a group like your group, Young Palestinians and Israelis, are very powerful instrument to send a message to the European Union and to the European countries to tell them, no, there is still a space for dialogue, and the proof that we have the example of this excellent group of young Israelis and Palestinians that are ready and able to come to talk to each other. And I think that the EU since 2015 is giving more attention to the people initiative. And I'm very happy about that, because as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, that whatever the solution, the political solution is, whether it's a one-state solution or it's a two-state solution, we need to talk to each other. We need to reinforce our mutual understanding in order to overcome all those challenges that has been mentioned, whether it is the environment, the COVID, or our common future. So I think that it is good. I'm very sad that due to the COVID restrictions in Europe that you couldn't make this visit in October, but I hope that by the beginning of next year, or even before next summer, that you can achieve this important initiative. Again, to send a strong message to the Europeans that not only we are ready to talk to each other, but we have already started talking to each other at the young generations level. This is very important, and I will end by saying that to join Jean-Daniel very good comment regarding the need to extend this initiative to other people. He mentioned the need maybe to create a movement in universities and in schools, because during the last 30 years since we started negotiations in 1993, there was the people-to-people track in 1993, but unfortunately this did not really achieve lots of results. What we need today is how can each one of the young people present here could work to extend this movement to reach out a larger group of people from the Palestinian and from the Israeli side. This is very important. The second point, and this is the last one, is how can we work together to make this initiative sustainable? And here comes the importance of visits to Brussels, to the United Nations, or to other countries to make this movement, to give it more visibility and to give it more credibility among international actors in order for them to give the financial or the political support for this kind of movement. Therefore, how to extend it and how to make it more sustainable. And I think that the visit to Brussels could help very much to achieve those two objectives. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much. And Yoni?
Yes, thanks. Well, this is actually, for me, the most interesting question, because working at the UN, this is really what we constantly ask ourselves. What can our organization and our mission here can do more? And I can tell you that there's been a very, there's been a process over the past year. I'm not going to get into details, but we've had some budget to hire a consultant and to lead a very structured process and discussions with various civil society organizations to see how we can support such initiatives, peace building initiatives more. And it's been a very fruitful process, and I think it will impact our missions. I hope it will impact the work we do here. But I think, personally, I feel that there's much more that we should do and could do to support peace building activities. But I want to say a general comment about the UN, because I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, the UN can do what member states mandate the UN to do, and what the member states support the UN to do. So, since I started my job, I've been receiving quite frequently emails and documents from various well-meaning people who have the perfect idea to how to resolve the conflict, and peace plans and various initiatives. And I have to politely explain to them that, we as the UN, we are not mandated to provide, to suggest a solution to the conflict. We abide by, our role is to represent Security Council resolutions in international law. But since the UNSCOP committee of 1947, the UN was not mandated to propose a resolution to the conflict. Our role here is to speak out, to call out violations, to do preventive diplomacy on the ground, to support humanitarian projects and development projects, and to try to push to support the conditions that would allow a return to negotiations. But at the end of the day, there will have to be a moment where, officials from both sides, the leadership of both sides with legitimacy from their people, sit together and discuss the terms of the peace agreement. And that, I don't think the UN can replace, or anyone can replace that. And that I think goes back to the role of youth, because I think that it's important to engage with the UN. It's important to inform the UN of the views of the youth. But again, at the end of the day, it will be Palestinian and Israeli leaders who will sit and negotiate, and their ability to compromise, their ability to reach an agreement will be shaped by the atmosphere that exists on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. It will be shaped by the ideas that circulate within these two societies. And so I think, we all have a role, as now I'm speaking less as a UN official and more as an Israeli citizen, but I think as Israelis and Palestinians, I think we have, our role is to try to shape our societies and to prepare our societies to build the willingness and the ability to support leaders who would actually lead us towards peace on both sides. And that we can do in many ways. One of them is to have these discussions, but also to write, to publish, to engage, to spread out ideas, to do all these various peace building activities that we mentioned earlier. But I'll stop here because it really opens up a longer discussion.
Thank you so much. And Summer for the final word.
Thanks, Stephen. So, Stephen, your question was, how can we engage youth in the peacemaking process? And I think it's important to, I have 2 points to make. The first one is to stress the importance of values. And the second is looking forward, how I think the youth can play a role. So firstly, with regards to values, I think it's important to look back actually at the title of this panel, which is not how can we make peace in Palestine or what the role is of the youth in Gaza. It's how can we make peace, or how can the youth support peace in the Middle East? And I think it's important to remember that Palestine-Israel is not the only conflict in the Middle East. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier that I'm proudly Syrian, and not all wars or conflicts are battles between two different peoples. Unfortunately, we can see the example of Syria, and we can see how the damaging effects that one group can do to its own people. So in terms of how can youth support peace in the Middle East, it's a regional issue, and it's not something that's purely driven by the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I think, the youth as a movement, the global youth, I think, have a role to play in the Middle East. I don't think it's just a Palestinian or Israeli thing. The question is, who will our leaders be in the future? But not only who will be Palestinian leaders or Israeli leaders, but vitally, who will be the leaders in the West? And increasingly, who will be the leaders in the East? The youth of today, as mentioned by Hanna and as I mentioned in my introductory statements, have less of a historical understanding, thankfully, and experience of conflict in the region. Now, if they don't, or if they are not driven by their experiences or by their history, what will drive the youth? And I'm an ardent believer in the fact that I think it's values. I think we are witnessing the coming of age of a generation who have been raised in an era of liberal, values-based international world order, obviously removing the past 4 years of Donald Trump. Youth around the world are driving action against climate change, against modern slavery, against poverty. Why would they not take action against occupation or against injustice? Similarly, why would they not take action against ineffective leadership or leadership that is corrupt and that has little to show for decades of negotiation? I would assume that the Israeli leadership are cognizant of this. And, if one day, hopefully, Palestine is governed by inspiring leaders, with all due respect to our octogenarian president, we will be able to rally international and vitally regional support more effectively. If we are able to make the case that we are victims of injustice and injustice is wrong, then the future leaders of China, of the US, of France, Italy, or New Zealand, or even Switzerland, who are values-driven, and the youth of today are more likely to support us. And as a result of that, the conflict is less likely to be as divided. Palestinian youth obviously will have to play a vital role in that. And I think that goes back to the point that Ambassador Ruch made and that Adel Kantor made, which is the role of education is key. I mean, looking forward, and to make my second point really, what is the actions that we can take now to affect change later? Of course, we need to give the youth education. We need to offer them opportunities to interact with each other, exactly as Debate for Peace offers. Ambassador Ruch stressed the importance of integration amongst the wider group in the region, but we should support scholarships. We should support interaction between both sides at every level. I mean, Palestinian and Israeli diaspora have been very successful. And if you're to ask them, or if you're to ask me, how can they support youth and how can they support peace building in the future? It's invest in students to go abroad, allow them to be educated outside of the bubble that they're living in, where emotional or historical ties can take precedence over rationality and education. I mean, it's interesting, but I think it was Adel Kantor, or possibly Ambassador Ruch, who made the point that Hebrew should be taught in Palestinian schools and Arabic should be taught in Israeli schools, and I couldn't agree more. But more than that, how many Palestinians do we see going to China to learn Mandarin? Or how many Israelis do we see going to Northern Ireland to learn the struggle and the concept and the consequences of occupation? We can only benefit from our global position and the globalization that is coming in the 21st century. And I think it's a shame and it's a tragedy for Palestinians and Israeli youth to not take advantage, or not to be given the opportunity to take advantage of the world that we live in. But in terms of the question of what can we do and how do we empower the youth, I think it's an interesting question, but in part it deceives the reality. The youth of today will be the adults of tomorrow. That's a fact. There's only time that is in the barrier, or that is in the way of that fact. Now, we have to wait for those who have the opportunity to be educated, those fantastic individuals who are on the first panel, to have the opportunity to go to university and hopefully further their education, have those experiences that I mentioned, have the experience that Ambassador Atieh mentioned in terms of meeting youth from the other side, broadening their knowledge, broadening their experience. And then hopefully, if they're still motivated by the conflict and by peacemaking, they'll come back to their respective jurisdictions. they will get a job at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministries of Defense, the Ministries of Interior, and they will be able to enact that change that they will want to see or that they are keen to raise awareness of at this early age. And I say from my perspective, but also I think on perspective or on behalf of the fellow Palestinians and Israelis who spoke in the first panel, but we will have our time. How will the youth make a difference? I think wait and see. We will have our time, and I think history will be unkind to those who prevent or those who blockade the youth from having those opportunities that they can so desperately benefit from. So in sum, how can the youth support peace? Educate them and wait, and time will tell.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of the panelists. Thank you for your time, both the first and the second panel. The goal was to hold the UN75 Israel-Palestine event that was, involving civil debate and really bring something productive out of the discussion. And I think we definitely got that here. So a lot of your ideas will be included in the report that we send to the UN75 team that's compiling the report. And just again, thank you all for all of your work, for believing in us, and for participating in these really interesting panels.
Thank you very much. Do more things like that.